So here we have the newest version of Cinema 4D, version 13. This is the default layout. This is what you should see as long as you haven't modified anything. And let's just start from the beginning. Um, so this is our viewport where we're going to be able to view our objects and rotate around them and manipulate them. And the first thing I suppose we should do is make an object so we can kind of look at it. And the easiest way to do that would be click on this blue cube right here. If I just left click one time, boom, then we're going to create a cube. So this is our viewport, and one of the most basic things we can do is move around in the viewport, and we do that through the interface with these first three buttons here. If we click on this first one, if we left click on it, we can actually move our camera, move our point of view left and right, up and down. If we right click on this, then we actually dolly in and out. The camera is getting physically closer and farther from our object. The next button is this little arrow one. And if we left click on it, then what we're doing is zooming in and out from our object. So actually, I thought it was zoom. I guess not. If we left click, we seem to dolly out as well. But if we right click on this one, then we're actually zooming in and out. So our camera isn't changing position. It's just zooming in and out. So you want to be careful with that. You might get a little bit lost. And then this third one is the orbit tool, so we can rotate around our object. And if we right click on that, then we actually spin the camera around. Now, if you get kind of lost in the interface and you're not sure where you are, it gets kind of all goofy, then there's two very useful things you can do. One is you can hit the letter O on your keyboard, and that will kind of focus in on your currently selected object. And the other is if you get completely lost and you just don't know what you're doing, then you can go over here and we can go to our different views here. So, and just click on a different one. So we went to cameras in our viewport, and we can click on say parallel, and it's going to reset, and we go back to perspective, and that has reset our camera back to the default. So if you get completely lost, you can go cameras, and then click on one of these other types, and then click back on perspective, and that resets us back to this default. Okay, so that's a little bit of navigation. Now let's move on to some ways of manipulating an object. Now, some of the primary tools for this are these four right here. First, we have our selection tool. If we click on that, then I can click in different places in the viewport. And if I click off in this blank space, I deselect everything. I didn't select anything. If I click right on this cube, just left click one time, then I will select it. If I had multiple objects, I will make a sphere. Then I can click right in the viewport and grab these different objects. Next up, we have the move tool. And the move tool allows us to move any object that we currently have selected. So we can, if we click directly on this green arrow, we can move it up and down on just the y-axis. And you can see right in the interface, you see a little number there that represents how far we're moving it. And if you hold down the shift key, you can actually snap it by units of 10. And you'll notice that, let's say I move this up 90, you see down here, this is our coordinate manager, and you see the corresponding number will change here. I'm going to hit undo, which is just Apple Z or Control Z. And let's try another axis. This blue one is the Z axis, and we can move it along that line. I can hit undo again. And then we have the red one, the X axis, and we move it along that axis. In addition to that, if you set up default, you should see these little axis bands. And if you click on one of those, you see how it lights up two axes. Yeah, I think you said axes. So if I grab this one, it's actually the yellow, I mean the green one and the blue one at the same time, Y and Z, and I can move on both of those axes at the same time. If you look down in the coordinate manager, you see how two numbers are moving, but the X isn't moving at all. So that's pretty useful. In addition to that, if we were to click and hold anywhere in this viewport, we can kind of move it around. But you see all three axes are changing numbers, so that's not a good way to move things around in general. It'd be very easy, if you're not careful, to accidentally put one object in front of another one, or have things intersect, and you might think you're just moving it to the left, but you're actually moving it up and further into the foreground. Like you're never sure what you're doing if you don't carefully move it. Now, in addition to being able to move things like this, you can also manually type in a number. I could type in on the y-axis here in my coordinate manager, I can type in 100 and hit enter or apply, and it will move up 100 units. I'm going to say units because default it's set up in centimeters, but you could have it set up in inches or miles or anything you like. So I'm just going to say units. The next tool is the scale tool. Now that's not going to do too much right now because of the nature of this object. But if I were to just click anywhere, now that I have this object selected, if I'm on the scale tool, if I click and I drag, it's actually going to scale my object up and down. I can hit undo. Um, Now, something to keep in mind is when you're doing things like move tool and scale tool, make sure you click where you want to. You can click anywhere in the viewport, but if you click on one of these axes, then it's going to change how it's affected. Let's say I just want to move this, over there like that. But if I accidentally click on this Y and I drag it over, you see it's not working because I'm on the Y, which means it constrains it just going up and down. And that will move us to the fourth tool here, the rotate tool. And that allows us to rotate our object in the same way before. I can click on just this red one and have it constrained to the to P for pitch. We can hit undo, and we can also do the blue one, which corresponds with Z, and Z is bank. And the green one, spinning around like that, and I forget what H stands for, but it's a plain term. Maybe horizon, but I don't think so. So those are the four basic tools for manipulating an object like this. Now, like I said, we can go back to our selection tool and we can select different objects. We also have our object manager over here, which allows we can click directly on the object and its name in order to manipulate it. So let's move on to the next part of the tutorial, and that would be some very, very basics of modeling. Actually, let's do some basics of hierarchy first. I'm going to delete the sphere by clicking on it, and while still moused over this menu, the object menu, I'm going to hit delete. Cinema 4D is context sensitive, where wherever your mouse is your active area. So if I had my mouse over here, that'll affect this, but if I had my mouse, say, over here, it might affect what's in this menu. So you want to make sure your mouse is always where you need it to be when you're doing a command. So why don't we go ahead and I'm going to make another sphere, but it's going to create it right in the 0, 0, 0 spot. So you see everything here, we get 0 position and 0 rotation, so it's kind of at its default. Now, I want to talk a little bit about hierarchy over here. So if I were to take this sphere and maybe move it up a little bit, it's kind of doing its thing. It's just sitting there by itself and it doesn't affect anything else. Now, if I were to grab over here, if I just click down to this blank space, I can do a rectangle select here. And I can grab both of these objects. And now if I were to grab on any of these axes, and you see there's actually the axis bands here all the time, even if we're on the selection tool. So we can actually do the move commands while we're on selection. But just to keep things simple, why don't we click on the move tool? And I can click on, say, the blue axis, Z, and I can move both of these objects at the same time. And that's just because I have both selected. But we can start doing things with a hierarchy, which means we can have parent-child relationships between objects. So I can take this sphere and drop it directly on the word cube, and now you see it becomes a child of cube. Cube is the parent. Now, if I click on the cube, anything the cube does, the sphere has to do. So if I click on the cube and I start moving it on X, you see the sphere does the same thing, even though I don't have it directly selected. And if I were to rotate my cube, the sphere will rotate around relative to that same position. Now the sphere is a child, so it can do whatever it wants by itself. So if I click on the move tool and I click on the sphere, I can still move the sphere by itself because it's the child. Anything the parent does, the child has to do, but children can do things and the parent won't be affected. So we can go and make maybe a slightly more complicated hierarchy. So I can let's make another cube, and I'm going to click on my viewport and I can rotate around, and we can grab this cube and maybe move it over. And I can grab my scale tool and I can scale it down. And I'm going to make a child. And then we can copy this cube. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can hit Command C for copy, Command V, which you're probably familiar with from lots of other programs. And I can drop this in that hierarchy as well, and then go to the move tool, and maybe I can move it over to the other side here. And now I have two objects in this hierarchy. Well, three objects in the hierarchy, two children. And when I click on the parent, anything the parent does, the children have to do as well. And I can click on one child, and it will be doing its own thing as well, and it doesn't affect its parent or its siblings. So this is all very useful. for a number of things. Another thing that can be very useful is creating what's called a null object. And I'm actually not sure where we hide that in these menus. Oh, they put it in this menu now, 13. So if you click on this, if you click and you hold down on, well, really any of these icons, almost all of them, if it has this little arrow in the corner, it'll fly out a larger menu and you have lots of different objects to work with. So one very useful object is this null object. And I'm going to start by deleting this so I have nothing to see. And a null object is actually just an axis. It isn't any geometry. There's nothing that will render. It's just kind of a point in space that you can use kind of like a folder. You can put things in that folder. So now I can create a cube. And I could create a bunch of cubes. So I have 3 different cubes now, and I can move one up here and maybe move one back. Click on this one and move it down. And I can grab all 3 of these. If I hold down Shift, I can actually select multiple objects, and I can drop it as a child of the null. So now if I grab this null and move it around, it's like they're all grouped together inside of it. Next little thing, just for housekeeping that might be useful, is you can rename objects, and you rename it just by double-clicking on its name. So I can double-click on null and just type in, say, boxes. And that's a typo. Boxes. And then we have all of our different cubes, and they're named uniquely, but we could double-click on that and name those as well. So that's some basics of a hierarchy, and we can stack things on top. You know, you get a complex stack of things. Why don't we just do that real quick? I'm going to create a cube, and let's copy and paste that cube, and I'll make it a child, and I'm going to move it up a little bit. Oop, I missed. I'm going to hit undo and then grab this green one and move it up. And now I'm going to have this new cube and copy and paste that one. I'm going to drop it as a child, and I'm going to move that up. And I'm going to copy and paste that one and make it a child. I'm going to keep on moving my viewport so I can see what I'm doing. And now you see we kind of have this stack of boxes. And because of the parent-child relationship, if I click on this bottom one and hit go up to rotate, I'm sorry, I'm using the shortcut, so the letter R will get to rotate. If I rotate this parent box, every child has to do the same thing. And hit undo. But if I go to the first child and I go to rotate it, you see that first one isn't affected. The parent isn't affected. If I click on this next one, I can rotate this one. If I click on this bottom one, then it will just do its thing by itself. But all these parents will still affect the children however we want to. So yeah, so you can make more complex hierarchies, and in the future we'll make very complex hierarchies. Okay. So that's cool, that's fun. Now let's do a little bit of modeling, and we're just going to do the very basics here. So I'm going to create a cube, and my viewport's a little off, so like I said before, if you hit the letter O, that focuses in on the currently selected object or objects. So this is our cube, and I'm using some navigation shortcuts, which is usually the Alt button on the Mac at least. If you hold down Alt and you kind of left-click, then you'll rotate around wherever you clicked, and if you right click, then you'll kind of zoom in and out. And if you use your middle mouse button while holding down Alt, you can move left and right. You see those exactly correspond with these buttons up here. As you're getting used to it, you might want to click on these, but the Alt Option button makes this very simple. So this object can be manipulated in a whole bunch of different ways, and I don't want to spend too long here because I don't want this tutorial to be 2 hours long. But every object, when you click on it, has properties down here. And all these properties will affect how it looks and how it behaves. So when you click on this cube, default it's on this object tab. You might have other ones selected. You can left click and you see all these different ones pop up. For now, I want to go to the object tab, and we have 3 parameters right here. We have size X, Y, and Z. And if I click and I drag this parameter up and down, I will change how this cube looks. So I'm making it taller and shorter. We have other parameters like segments, and as I click on that, you can see we're actually adding additional segments to our shape. And then separate surfaces, we don't have to worry about that right now, it's no fun. But if we click on the fillet button, or the fillet button, then we can round the corners of the cube. Every object has unique parameters. So you should go through this menu and kind of explore all the different options you have. But and even when we turn on this checkbox and we get more options down here, and we can change these parameters by dragging the numbers up and down. You see we can change the number of subdivisions here. Whole bunch of different options. Every single object has lots and lots of options. Just for an example, why don't we delete the cube? We'll go to this cone, And you see it's got completely different parameters, and we can change how the top looks and the bottom. And a lot of objects have multiple tabs. So you see here we're on object, but you also have caps. And in caps, we can do things like round the top and round the bottom. So you get a lot of options for making really cool looking shapes. We can probably really quickly make a Hershey Kiss type shape here. There, boom. That's neat. Okay, so that's that. Now, what do you do with an object when you can't go any further? Let's say we want to turn this cube into a spaceship. Well, you're not going to be able to do that with a couple parameters here. So what we're going to need to do then is make our object editable. Now, there's a very important note here. When we make an object editable, that means we can't go back. Once you make an object editable, you can't get these parameters anymore. It will become a polygon object. At least a cube will. Anything in this menu will become a polygon object. So the way we make it editable is by clicking this button right here. But the faster way is hitting the letter C. Now, if you just let the mouse sit on here for a little bit, it's going to give you a little description of the tool and tell you the shortcut. And also, if you look down here in the status bar, when I mouse over something, you see it says the same thing. So you can quickly learn the shortcuts by mousing over these different tools, and you see how the little shortcut names pop up. I highly suggest learning shortcuts. The best way to do that is to force yourself to use it. Like I know if you move up here and you can't remember the shortcut from the move tools, it's really easy to move up here and then click on it. Don't click on it. Move up here, find out what the tool's name is, and then hit the key on the keyboard, and you'll get used to it in a couple days. I guarantee it. Okay, so we have to make this object editable. Now, right now, you know, we have the cube and we have all these nice parameters. But as soon as I click on this button or hit the letter C, it becomes a polygon object and it no longer has an object tab. There's no parameters for us to mess with. But now that we've made it editable, and look, you even see this icon change. I can hit undo. You see a cube and we make it editable, and now it says it's a polygon object. But now that we've done that, we have more tools at our disposal. Namely, we can access this object's points, edges, and polygons. Now, I don't want you guys to get lost here, and a lot of people have trouble with this in the beginning. Is if you're trying to do something to your objects and it's not behaving the way you think it should be, then I want you to double check that you're on the proper tool over here. This affects your entire object. This affects your points, this affects your edges, this affects your polygons. We won't mess with these other ones for now. In addition to that, like if you're trying to move something and it's rotating, then you've probably got the wrong tool selected up here. But right now, let's stick to the tools we've just talked about. So we have points, edges, and polygons. Let's go to polygons right here. And now, instead of affecting the entire object, we can go to the selection tool and we can actually select individual faces here. We can select different polygons. So if I were to just click right here on the top, I'm grabbing only this topmost polygon. Now I can go to the move tool and I can move this polygon up and down. I could move it left and right. And you see that we're now creating a completely brand new shape. You can hit undo, and every tool that we have can manipulate these polygons and points and edges in different ways. Where on the move tool, I can click on the scale tool, and now I'm in the scale tool. If I click anywhere in the viewport except on these handles, and I scale, you see this whole polygon is scaling down uniformly. If I were to click on just, say, this green handle here, I can scale it on just that axis. Also, keep in mind you hold down Shift and it will snap by 10-degree increments. I can also grab just this red one, scale down just on that. And of course, we can go to the rotate tool and I can grab something and I can rotate it like that. Or like anything. And of course, hold down Shift and snap to 5-degree increments. We can also go to, hit undo. We can also go to the point tool and go to selection. Now you see the little corners have points on them. I can click and drag. So, you know, the selection tool, I can now click and drag, and any point I mouse over will be added to the selection. So now I can manipulate just these 2 points right here. If we go to move, then we'll have the move tool, and I can go to scale and scale these points up or down, and I can go to the rotate tool and even rotate these around. And of course we have edges, which is very similar, but I don't think we'll be using that too much right now. But you can click on an edge and move the edge, scale the edge, rotate the edge. Pretty cool. Now some quick basics on the selection tool. When you click on any face with the selection tool, you will select it. If you click and hold down, you can grab multiple faces. But oftentimes you want to add more polygons or deselect polygons from that selection. So what you do is if we say rotate our view around, and we're over here, by having the selection tool and holding down the shift key, now when I click, I will add to that selection. If I hold down shift, click, I will add to the selection. The opposite is holding down control. If I hold down control and click, I will deselect the one I touch. If I hold down control and I click anywhere in the viewport and I go drag, I can actually deselect multiple polygons at a time. See, I selected both of those in the single click. And I hold down shift and I add them back in. This is a very useful tool and we'll be going back and forth using it very often. Now, very quickly, I want to tell you about a modeling tool or two. And keep in mind, I said I was going to go through all these things very quickly, kind of give you a nice overview of a bunch of different tools in Cinema 4D. Watch this tutorial as many times as you need to get a feel for the basics. Okay, so what I want to do is go to the polygon tool and selection tool. And I want to select just one polygon. I want to select just this top one to start out with. And I want to talk about a couple of modeling tools. Now, there are a lot of different tools, and you find a lot of them under, I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with the new menu arrangement. Mesh. It's probably under Mesh and Creation Tools. Yeah. So if you want to manually find it, you click on Mesh and you go to Create Tools, and then we can go down to these different tools that we're going to talk about right now. But I prefer the shortcuts. And one of the shortcuts is for the Extrude tool, and that is the letter D. So I want to have a polygon selected and then hit the letter D, and that is the Extrude tool. Now the way we use the Extrude tool is by clicking anywhere in the viewport except on these arrows. Don't click on the arrows. If I click anywhere in the viewport and I start to drag, I'm going to create some brand new polygons. You see, as I do this single extrude, I actually create 1, 2, 3, 4 brand new polygons. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to click anywhere in the viewport except on those axes. And I can drag. And I think you want to kind of go in an upper, move up and to the right with the mouse. And that will extrude up. And if you move down and to the left, it'll extrude downward. You can even pull it inside, but you don't want to do that. Then you get intersecting polygons. And something to keep in mind, I see beginners do make this mistake often. If you want to do an extrude, let's say you want to make a really tall extrude like that, but let's say you're not moving your mouse properly, you kind of run out of room, don't let go of your mouse button. Because what I often see people do is they're trying to make some big tall thing and they drag it and then drag and drag and they keep on letting go of their mouse and they start making all these tiny little extrudes. And we see we've actually made a ton of different polygons here. If you want to have one single giant extrude, make sure that's what you do. You do one long click and you can actually move it. Now, something to keep in mind is when you click and you drag and you make a new extrude, you can actually grab these other modeling tools and manipulate it. You can move these around like this. Move them all over the place. And after I extrude, I still have the extrude tool going. I can actually do an extrude, and then I can go up to the scale tool and maybe scale that down. And I hit the letter D for extrude again, because when we hit D, when we click on this, we're off the extrude tool. When we hit the letter D, we're back on it again. I can click and drag again. And here you can see you can start making some interesting shapes. I can extrude again, go to scale tool, maybe scale this out a couple times, hit the letter D for extrude again, pull it out. I can actually pull it again, then go up to this tool, scale, or hit the letter T, and I can scale that down now. And now I can actually hit the letter D again, and instead of extruding up, I actually extrude down. We can make a little hole inside of it. So that is the extrude tool. Another tool that's really cool is inner extrude. I'm going to hit undo a whole bunch of times. Okay, there's a cube. So I want to have a single polygon. I can hit the letter O and zoom up on the whole thing. I'm still on the polygon tool, and let's go to select and make sure you just have one polygon selected. Next tool we're going to use is called the inner extrude tool, and it's very similar. I get the letter I for the inner extrude tool, the letter I. If I click anywhere in the viewport and I start dragging, it's going to do very similar to what we did before. It's going to create 4 new polygons, 1, 2, 3, 4. But it actually pulls it inward, or hit undo. We can drag inward, or we can drag it outward. Now you want to be careful there. You see that flickering? That's because we have intersecting polygons, because there's polygons occupying the exact same space. So you want to be careful about that. Now something that's cool is we can do this to multiple polygons at a time. I can select this polygon. I'm on the selection tool, of course. And I'm going to rotate around and grab the opposite side. And I can hit the letter I for inner extrude. And I can drag down, and you see I'm actually doing an extrude identically on both sides. And now I could say hit the letter D, and I can extrude outward. And I could hit the letter I and do an inner extrude, but I'm going to pull it outward, and maybe hit the letter D and then pull it out. So just you see with these two tools, it's giving us a lot of power to manipulate this shape. So what I would like you to do is very quickly model a spaceship. And we have a good reason for modeling a spaceship for the next part of this project. So just from a cube, and let's do this from scratch real quick, and I want you to do it however you like, is I want you to create a cube, and I want you to make it editable with this button right here, or hit the letter C. And the one thing I want to make sure you do, just for simplicity's sake, is I want you to model it as if the Z-axis is the front. See how this arrow points towards Z? Have that be the front of the spaceship. So what I'm going to do, just so I remember, is click on maybe this front and pull this nose out a little bit. But now I want to just start using the tools that we've already talked about. So the extrude and inner extrude and rotate and scale. So I can hit, say, the letter I and extrude in, hit the letter D, extrude out, maybe hit the letter I, do it out a little bit, and pull it out more. Nice little bump there, and I can extrude out again. Maybe go to my scale tool, and I can scale this down and kind of make a cockpit up there. And then, let's see, I can make some wings. And I want you to make yours look however you like, but kind of make that Z-axis point forward. It'll make that next step a little bit simpler. And I'm going to grab these two sides. I rotate it around, hit the letter I, maybe inner extrude a little bit, hit the letter D, pull them out. I'm going to hit the letter I again. I'm going to extrude down, hit the letter D. I'm actually going to pull inward just for fun. Hit the letter I, extrude in a little bit, hit the letter D, extrude outward. And I'm just trying to make some fun shapes. Keep it simple. Don't get too complicated. Or if you want to spend some time and make it more fancy, feel free. Hit the letter I for inner extrude, pull it out. I'm going to pull these out a little bit. And then we can start having some fun here. I'm going to select maybe that polygon and hold down Shift and grab this one. And hit the letter D and I can extrude these out. And now that I've done that, I can go to the Scale tool, maybe scale these down. Not that far. I don't want to go so far that they start to invert. That's bad. When you see that flickering, that means bad things are going on. So I want to scale it down a little bit like that. That looks kind of cool. And let's see, I'll grab the back here. Maybe hit the letter I, pull it in a little. Hit D, pull it back. Hit I, pull it out. D. I can add a little texture in here by doing a series of tiny extrudes at different distances. Maybe a little cargo bay area. I don't know. Just having fun. Give it a big bumblebee butt. Kind of like Firefly. Serenity. But not too much. I can click on this top polygon, go to select, click on this, hit the letter I, I'll do a little extrude there, and I can actually go to scale tool and maybe pull this in a little skinnier, hit the letter D for extrude, pull out, and then from there I could even grab this arrow and pull it back a little bit, hit the letter D, pull it up, maybe I'll go to selection and I can grab that polygon. I don't want this one, so I'm going to deselect it holding down Control, and then go over and grab this one, but you see I grabbed another one I didn't want, so I'm going to hold down Control and deselect that. So now I've got those two polygons. Hit the letter D. I can extrude those out like this. I can even grab this and pull those back. Get a little crazy spoiler going on there. So that's looking pretty crazy. I can grab, say, those two polygons there and these two. And I can hit the letter I for inner extrude, pull it down a little bit, hit the letter D, pull those in. That gives us some kind of some cool detail. I can even go to my point tool. Don't forget about that. I can go to my point tool. I'm going to go selection. Going to grab these 2 points. And I can pull this in. Oh dear, looks like I made a little mistake there. Yeah, sure did. I accidentally did a double extrude there, which I didn't mean to do. But hopefully you guys didn't. I can do what I wanted to do and kind of pull this in a little bit like that. So there we go. That's looking kind of cool. I don't want to go overboard here. Now one thing, just because it's bugging me a little bit. Now if we hit render, that's right here. We can go up to word render and say render view. It'll actually render our picture. This is like a final image of it. But there's what is called Phong tag, the Phong tag is smoothing this out in ways that I don't want it to. And that's this tag right now. We're not going to talk about it too much, but I'm going to click on it. I'm going to delete it, which will, you see when I do that, how this kind of looks like looks a little weird there. It's kind of smoothed out. I'm going to hit delete on that, and then it gets nice and hard edged. So that's fine for right now for me. So there's my very, very basic spaceship. What I want to do right now is actually I'm going to name it ship. It's going to be organized. And we are now going to create some materials. Not too many. We're going to make the first one. We make our new materials down here. And there's two different ways of making a new material. You can go create new material, or the better way is just to double click in this blank space and it will make a new one. So now we have this new material. If you double click on your material, it'll open up your material editor. We have a whole bunch of different channels, and these are all sorts of different cool ways of controlling your textures and materials. But let's keep it basic. Let's just pick the color of our spaceship. So we're in the color channel in this material, and using these sliders, we can manipulate and create the color of our spaceship. I kind of like that. I can pull the brightness back. You could also click on this, and it'll pop up a dialog box that will enable you to kind of choose the exact color that you like. So, let's keep it basic. So here is the color of my spaceship. And what I'm going to do is click on this material, and I'm going to drag it directly onto my spaceship right here. I'm going to drag it right into the word ship. When I let go, boom, now my spaceship is that color. Now let's have a little bit of fun and make a second material. I'm going to double click in this blank space, and let's make this, I don't know. I can make it maybe just black. I'm going to grab the brightness and pull it all the way back so we get this black texture. And what I want to do is maybe add some cool variation into my ship. Now this is a neat trick you can do in Cinema 4D is I want you to go around and select some polygons. I'm going to select maybe these two and maybe these. Maybe we can do a stripe along the top. I'm going to grab all of these. Don't want that one. I'm going to rotate around so I can make sure I can grab these ones I missed, like right there, and these. And I'm going to grab those. So there we go. Now we got a little spot for that. So you see all these different polygons I've gotten selected. I can actually take this material, and now that I've got these polygons selected, if I grab this material and drag it straight onto something I have selected, it will apply to just those polygons. So now you see we have two different materials, and I automatically made a texture tag that we don't really have to worry about right now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit render view. And now you see I've got my spaceship, and I've got this nice stripe along it. Just because it's hard to see, I'm actually going to make it white instead of black. So now you see I got this white stripe that runs along it. So that is more than enough texture stuff for right now. Feel free to have fun in here. You can go in here and say turn on reflection, and you'll get reflective material. You can make it transparent. You can add some, actually let's do some luminance. I didn't really make a proper engine on mine, but I can click back here and maybe hit the letter I, hit the letter D, and maybe just extrude in a little bit. I'll make that my engine. I'll make a brand new material, and I can go into luminance and then make something that kind of glows. So I'm going to make like a blue ion booster. And I can drag this right to this polygon that I still have selected, and boom, now just that one has that material applied. When I hit render, you see we get this glowy blue. Now, speaking of glow, you can even go in here and turn on that glow checkbox. And then when you hit render, you'll get a glow back there. Now, I don't actually want that, so I'm going to turn it off. But there we go. Basic spaceship, textured up real nice. Let's go back to our object tool. That's this one right here, I'm sorry. So we go back to our object tool, and now you see here's my spaceship, and you see I've got my basic object axis right here, the model axis, and you see that I'm pointed, the front of my spaceship is on the blue axis towards the front, towards the arrow. So there we go. So now we can make this baby fly around. And we're going to do that, and we're going to do that by creating a spline. Now, what I want you to do is go to your top view. And the way we do that is actually, we can see this fourth button right here. If we left click right on this fourth button, it's going to open up 4 different view panels. So here's our default one, but here's our top view. It says it right there, top, right, front. So here's our top. And I'm going to click on that same button here. You see now we have 4 of those buttons. Whichever one you click on, it will make that big. So now I have my top view, and it's through this entire viewport. So what we can do is zoom out. And I want to zoom out a decent amount. So we have our spaceship there, but it's kind of tiny. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw a spline, and that's going to be the path that our spaceship is going to travel along. Now, there's a couple different ways of doing it. We're going to be using the second menu. Right now we've been using this one, but we actually want to click and hold on the second one right here. This is a spline menu. We're going to draw our own spline. We have a whole bunch of different options here for the kind of spline we want to draw. Now, if you're familiar with Illustrator at all, then this might be the one for you. If you're not, you might want to use freehand. It's a little clunky, but if you click on it, then you should be able to just drag with your mouse and kind of draw a line, and this will be the path that your spaceship is going to travel. Now, I don't like it too much because you make sometimes these lines aren't super smooth, but this is good enough for the test. So go ahead and draw your line. You only want to draw one. If I were to click again, I actually start drawing a second one. I don't want that. If you don't like the one you make, go ahead and click on it and delete it. Go back to your spline drawing tool here, and then go ahead and draw yourself a new one. I definitely don't like that one. I'm going to undo and just draw one that I'm not upset with. You can actually cross over your line, but I'm not going to. So there we go. We got a spline. I don't like that one actually. I'm gonna make it like that. Okay, that's kind of cool. Now, something real basic. So here's our spline from the top, and I wanted to draw this first for a particular reason, and that's because I want us to model out a canyon, a very simple canyon, a little bit of an environment for our spaceship to fly around in. And we're going to do that by creating a plane. So in this menu with a cube, we can create a plane object. Now it's going to be very tiny right now. So what we want to do is actually scale it up. We're not on the scale, because we were drawing a spline, it automatically put us on the point tool. But let's click back on our object tool and go to scale, and we can just keep on clicking in the viewport and scale it up and up and up until our plane starts getting really big. And I want it to be so big that it kind of fills up this whole line. The whole line should be trapped there. So you can scale up, and if yours is offset like mine, you're going to click on the move tool and maybe move it over a little bit so it's kind of centered so that our line is trapped within this plane object. Now I want to keep on zooming out until you can see your entire plane. This is important. And what we're going to do is make a canyon. So we're in our top view right now, but this is the easiest way to do this. I want you to click on your plane, and let's subdivide this to an amount that I think will be good for everybody. Maybe 50 by 50. So click on your object, and in its object parameters, I want your width and height segments to be 50 by 50. Now that we've done that, we're going to make our plane editable. Now be careful, if you type in 50 here, and then you decide to, the next step is make editable. If you hit the letter E, like right now if I hit the letter E, I'm actually typing the letter E down here and nothing's going to happen. If you hit enter, then it kind of glitches it, and this will default back to its smallest number, or 3 apparently. We don't want that, so you have to click off of it or acknowledge it somehow, and then click your make editable button. And once you do, you're going to see all these polygons. There's a whole bunch of polygons in this plane. There's actually 50 by 50 polygons. Now what we want to do is make a path for our object to fly around in. And the way I'm going to do that is to go to my polygon tool. So we have our plane selected. We go to our polygon tool and our selection tool. And it depends on how far out you are zoomed. But what I want to do is kind of trace that spline you can see. And what we're going to do is make this the canyon we're passing through. And now I can go a little beyond, like our flight path doesn't go all the way, but I can make this a little bit more interesting by grabbing some extra polygons. And I want to make sure I get a nice big selection here, make the canyon as wide as I can so that the spaceship has some room to fly. In fact, I could even cross over this a little bit, and we can even add in some extra little bumps and things to make this look a little more interesting. Oops, I accidentally clicked on my interface. So I keep on holding on shift, and I'm grabbing different little patches. But you see that the main important thing is that I've got this little line kind of traced in there. And don't forget, if you want to erase out from your selection, you can hold down Control and you can erase out some things. So, okay, that looks kind of interesting. Now let's go back to our normal view. I'm going to go back to our regular perspective view by clicking on this little button right here. and then click back on this one, and now we're back in our perspective. Now if I hit the letter O, I'll zoom out to the entire object, and you see what we've done. We've got this whole plane selected. Well, not the whole plane, but we've got the plane selected, and we've selected kind of our canyon run. And now what we can do is hit the letter D, and now what we could do is hit the letter D and just extrude this down. But there's a reason I don't like that. Now, if I click it and I drag it down, you see actually what we're doing. And that's kind of what we want. But you see we get these walls on the side. I don't want that. So a really neat trick is we are going to invert our selection. So you see all these polygons that we have selected. But what we can do is invert our selection. And we might be able to do it by right-clicking. I'm not sure. Nope. Well, I know the shortcut, but that's no good. So why don't we go to Mesh? Is it Mesh? Or maybe Selection? Okay. Just this one time, let's go to our Select menu, and we're going to go to Invert. And we've inverted our selection. Now you see everything I had selected isn't, and everything that wasn't is. But now when we hit the letter D to extrude, we're actually going to pull it up, and you see that looks a little cooler. Now if you want to put a little extra detail into this, we can actually extrude it a little bit, and then go back to your selection tool, and then hold down Control and deselect some parts of this. So I can deselect some of these edges, some of these areas. Now, if you can spend as much time on this as you want. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you can deselect some of these polygons, and then hit the layer D and extrude again, and you can keep on kind of developing a little environment this way. And you know, feel free to put as much detail in it as you want. I can click on these and maybe just take that and extrude that a little bit extra. Maybe a little pillar here, extrude that a little more. Now if you go and hit render, you see the shape we got. Now you're not going to see it that well because it might be a very similar color. But why don't we really quickly make a simple material for it. We're going to keep it very basic. I'm going to click down here. Something we should do is name these materials. You can do that by double clicking where it says its name, matte. So I can call this ship 1. And we can click on this one and say ship 2. Maybe click on this one and call it engine. And we can click on this one and call it ground. So we can click on it and let's make that material. So maybe make it a nice brown color. I like clicking on my interface here. I can pick out a color. And like I said, feel free to play around with all these different tabs, but this is just the introduction. We have the specular tab, which affects how shiny it kind of looks. It's not reflective, but you see if I pull this down, we get a really shiny little dot there. If we make it taller, it starts looking kind of shiny like that. Or we can make this really wide, and it's kind of a little more subtle, and we can make it not as tall. So I have a subtle specular. Now we can apply this to the object. Now you want to be careful. If I just drag it right here onto the object, it will only apply to that polygon selection just like we do with the spaceship. So what I'm going to do is actually drag it onto the plane object here, and you see it's applied to this entire thing. Now it's still not showing up that well, and that's because we haven't put any lights in the scene, but we're going to be doing that next. But before we do that, I want to do one last step here, and maybe give this a little bit of texture. And we're going to do that really, really simple by maybe going to our diffusion channel here. Usually we're on color. Oh, let's stay on color actually. On the color channel, instead of just doing a plain noise, we can put a shader in here. And you can actually put images or these mathematical shaders. There's lots of different options you can do. But I'm going to click right here and just copy what I do here, and feel free to play with these settings later. But I'm going to go to noise. I'm going to click on noise. What this does is it actually creates a procedural noise. Now, you see right here that the image is black and white, and this actually doesn't count at all. When this one's here, then this one's completely overridden as long as this slider's there. But in any case, if I were to hit render, file, render, you see my texture, my canyon actually has some texture. And we can actually go inside of this noise, and there's a lot of different parameters here, but you can make your noise look really cool and change it in a whole bunch of different ways. For one, I can make my global scale bigger. I'm going to make it way bigger. I'm going to type it from 100 to 1000. And now if I go to render, which the shortcut is Command R, now when I render, you see the noise a little bit better, but that's still not big enough for me. I'm going to add another 0, 10,000. I'm going to hit render, and now you see the noise is way bigger, and that's helping us distinguish between these walls. And what else can we do? We can make the noise taller. So I can go 1,000 tall. So this is X, Y, Z. So it's a taller noise now. And you see it. Well, you can't see it that well. But if I were to maybe shrink this down back down to 1,000, hit render, you see how these kind of stretch up the cave walls? I hit undo because I liked it being at 10,000. And actually, even here we have noise. But if you click on here, we actually have a whole big menu of different noises. And what's even better is this tiny little tab here. If you click on that, you see a preview of all different types of noises you can use. So I can click on one that I like the look of, say this one, Naki, and hit render, and now you see the cool texture that I get on it. And the last little step here would be to maybe give these colors. It's black and white, but I can click on, say, black, and say it's actually not black. It is a dark brown. And the light point will be maybe a nice little tan here. And now when I hit render, you see it's going to transition between the two noises that I just put in. So there we go. That's, you can of course get tons more fancy, but let's just leave it at that for now. Now I don't want to lag the computer too much, but we might be able to throw this into what is called a hypernurb. And a hypernurb is just an object that smooths out the polygons by generating additional polygons. So I'm going to see if it lags, and it might lag your machine, so you might not want to do it. But it's this object right here, add hypernurbs. If I take that and I take my plane and I drop it inside of it, you see how it smooths it out. Now, I have a pretty decent machine here, so you see I still get good refresh as I rotate my camera around. But if you're running a laptop or an older machine, then this might start lagging, and you might not want to do this. So let's rename some things. We can take our hypernurb here, and we can name it ground. And I didn't mention before, but if you hit this little minus, you can actually collapse a hierarchy, so it kind of hides the children, but they're still in there. And then we have the spline, we can name that path. So there we go. Now we have our environment, and we have a path, and we have our spaceship. Now, one more thing to do. Well, not one more thing, we have a couple more things, but let's make a light, and let's do this really simple. I'm going to click on this menu and hold down the button on this light bulb, and we are going to make an infinite light. And we're just going to do the simplest of lighting setups. What the infinite light does is it creates a light that acts as if it's super far away, and for our purposes, that will make it behave kind of like the sun. And that means all we have to do is click on rotate and rotate this light, and now the light points down the z-axis, the blue one. So whatever direction that is the direction that the light is pointing. So if we kind of rotate, for me, on this red axis on X, and maybe pull over a little bit on this green one, it rotates a little bit, and then when we hit render, you see that we've kind of got a light in the scene. And something else that's cool is when you click on the light, one of its parameters is shadow, and you can click on shadow and turn on different shadow types. And I'm going to turn on ray traced hard because the sun has a hard light. And now when I render, you see we get this nice hard shadow. So there's shadows casting here. Now it's filling in, like you see, it's kind of black and white now. It's like really bright and then black, so that's not good. So why don't we make another light? And this one's just an omni light. And if I were to hit render right now, yeah, it's not going to do too much for us like that. But what we could do, I think, is maybe hit ambient illumination. So we have this new light. Click on ambient illumination, and that's going to light everything up a whole bunch. Evenly, but that's good for our purposes right now. And what I actually kind of like to do is maybe add a little color into this light. So this is our overall skylight. It's like the sky casting that blue tinge. So why don't we put in a little bit of blue? And now we hit render. Now these areas are going to have a little bit of blue tint in it. But now to counter that, why don't we go into this light, which we can double click on the word light and maybe name it sun. We can give it a little bit of warmth. So that's a little warmer. And now we have two lights adding together, so it's getting a little bit bright. So our sun's intensity is good at 100, but maybe this blue light, maybe we should pull that back. So this is the intensity of it, and we can pull it back to, say, 50%. And now you see we get some light in the canyon, in the shadowy areas, but you still get the shadow. That's good enough for right now. Why don't we do one more little step here, and that is actually animate our spaceship. So, I'm going to rotate and kind of orient so I can see my whole canyon here. And the first thing we have to do actually is pull our path up. So I want you to click on the object tool here, click on the path, and go to the move tool. And we're going to pull the whole thing up a little bit. And you see my arrow is actually pointing down. That's because of the direction I drew the spline. Yours might be doing the same, but that's okay. Just be very careful and click and drag it straight up. You see how I'm dragging it up through my canyon? Now, I don't want to go too far. I just want to make it a little bit above the ground. So there we go. Now my path is above the ground. And now what we can do is attach our spaceship to it. And I hope that this upside down spline doesn't mess things up for me. But let's see how this works. Now we're going to do the most basic of keyframe animations. That's why we're setting up like this, so you can get a taste of modeling, texturing, lighting, and just the basics of animation. So we drew this spline and we want our spaceship to fly along it. So what I'm going to do is right click on my object called ship, right click on my spaceship, and I'm going to go to Cinema 4D tags, and then I'm going to click on Align to Spline. Not align the path, even though we called it path, say align to spline. And then click on that, and it's going to create this little tag on our ship. And now we can see the properties of that tag. This tag is what is selected. What we want to do is drag our path into this spline path. The way you do that is by clicking and holding on path and dragging it into this empty panel. Alternatively, and you want to be careful because if you just click and you let go, it deselects our tag, and now it's telling us parameters for our path. So we'd have to click back on our object here. Another thing you can do that's useful is this little, I forget what they call this, it's a picker. You click on this, and now that we have that selected, anything we click on will automatically go in. So I can click on path, and then boom, path appears in there. And you see, as soon as I do that, my spaceship jumped, and it's on the path. Now, something that's cool is position. Right here, we have this parameter called position. And as I drag up position, you're going to see my ship move along the spline. So that by itself is pretty cool already. But it's not perfect yet. But let's go ahead and animate this. And the way we're going to do that, and I just want you to follow my instructions exactly right here, is make sure that this says position 0. And right now your timeline, and that is this whole thing right here, your timeline should be at 0 as well. This little green, so this is where our current frame is. We want this dragged all the way to 0. It should say 0 right next to it. In addition to that, it should say 0 right here. So what we're saying is at the time of 0, our position is 0. And what I'm going to do is click on the word position right here, right click and say animation, add keyframe. Once again, at the time of 0, our position is 0%. I'm going to right click, animation, add keyframe. As soon as you do, you're going to see a little red dot appear. As soon as you have that red dot, now you take your timeline and you drag it all the way to the end, all the way up to 90. So 90 is 3 seconds worth of animation. So at the time of 90, we want our position to be 100%. So you type in 100 and then right click on position and say animation, add keyframe. If you didn't follow, rewind a little bit and do it again. But what this means is we can hit rewind right here, these play tools, hit rewind and hit play, and our spaceship is now automatically moving along the spline. Now it's not exactly moving the way we want it to. The most basic thing to fix that is click on tangential. This checkbox right here on the spline tag. If I click on tangential, then it turns my spaceship sideways. Wonderful. Oh no, I'm not sure why it does that, but hey. Well, yeah, it starts out sideways for I'm not sure why, and then straightens out, and now when I hit play, you see how it's actually pointing along the path. So that's pretty cool. Oop, you see how my view changed? That's because it's getting a little intensive for my computer to handle, so it's going to a simpler view mode. If I just hit pause, it'll go back to regular. Hit play, and it'll move along. Now, the reason I think my path is doing that funky little thing is if I zoom way up here, we're probably going to see a tiny little curve there at the end. You see that little hook? So if I click on my path, this is just for me, But I'm going to click my path, click on my point tool, and you see that point right there. So I can actually click on this point, and I could move it or rotate it or even delete it by hitting the delete key. But I'm just going to rotate it. So you see how I got that little curve there. So if I have that one point selected on the point mode, I can actually just click and rotate it a little bit and straighten it out. So there we go. Now I've got that point straightened out. Now you see my spaceship is moving at something of a jerky fashion. You see how it kind of accelerates and goes faster and slower at different parts? The way to fix that is to click on your path, and right now its intermediate points is set to adaptive. But go ahead and set that to uniform, and that should move, our spaceship should move at a constant speed. Oop, I keep getting a little refresh hiccup. Hit play, and it should be moving along at a pretty even speed now. Excellent. Now, something that's kind of cool, I can hit pause. I'm trying to anyway. Something that's kind of cool is we can go to our path and go to the points, and I can actually select, say, this point, and I can move it up and down. I can click on the, well, because of the way it's oriented right now, I would actually click on this blue arrow. I can drag it up a little bit, and I can maybe click on this point, and I can drag it down a little bit. I can make it go real low, but not so low. You see how it's going underneath the ground? I don't want to do that, but I can pull it down a little, maybe grab this one and pull it up a little bit. And what we're doing is just giving our spaceship like some ups and downs, a little bit. It can travel up and down. So I can hit rewind, hit play, and then you can see it travel up and then down and then up and down. So it gets a little height up and down. So that's kind of cool now. Now there's one, well, yeah, pretty much one last step to do. Maybe let's make a sky, just a really, really basic thing. We're going to do that through this menu right here, kind of this infinite looking floor. If you click on that and go to sky, don't click on physical sky, very careful. Click on regular sky right there. Just click on sky and boom, that's going to give us a background color. Before when we render, remember, it was black, but now when I hit render, it's going to be kind of this gray color. But we can make a new material that can be the sky. So why don't we go ahead and name it? You can also name it by double clicking on it and opening up this, and then we can type in it right here and click on sky. And why don't we make a gradient? A gradient, really straightforward. We can click on this little drop down, and you see the word gradient. So I click on gradient, and now we have a gradient. So just from experience, I know that I can click on the word gradient right here, or click on the picture, and we go inside of its parameters. And now we can draw our gradient. So the first thing I want to do is change it from 2D U to 2D V, so it's kind of like the horizon. And now I just know from experience that the horizon starts at the midpoint, because half of this is up and half of it's down. So I'm going to click on this anywhere below this line. It'll make a new knot. These are called knots. And if you double click on it, you can pick the color. So I'm going to maybe pick a nice sky blue. And so I have blue, and it'll fade up to white. Very straightforward. So I've done that. I can click on, take my sky and apply it directly to the sky object. And now we get a blue sky. Boom. So we get blue. Now if we were to look straight up, that's where you're kind of getting the white up there. So that's working pretty well. Excuse me. One last thing we want to do. Now, viewing the spaceship flying around from this particular angle might not be too exciting, but something that might be fun is seeing this flight from the point of view of the spaceship. And the way we're going to do that is actually create a camera. We're going to take this, we're going to create a camera, and what that actually does is creates a camera right where we are. Now that we've created that, if I move away, you see that we've actually got a camera object right there where we used to be sitting. But what we want to do is link to this camera. The way you do that is you click on this little button right here. I'm not even sure what to call it. But if you click on this button, you will be viewing the scene from the point of view of the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and it'll turn white. Boom. And now you see I moved to the camera, and now I'm seeing from the point of view of it. But what that means is we have a physical object in the scene now that we're linked to. So now as we move around, what I can do is manipulate this so I can move around and get right to my spaceship. So I'm actually going to move it until I get to a really good point of view next to my spaceship. I want to be kind of behind it right here. And we can actually get really close maybe to the side, something like this. But what we can do is we can take the cube, I mean not the cube, we can take the camera and make it a child of the spaceship. And if you remember the parent-child relationship, that means this camera has to do anything the spaceship does. So now when I hit rewind and I hit play, now we're moving with our spaceship. And now the viewport's not a great indicator of that. I'm going to hit pause because it was going really fast. But you can actually even see how we're passing into shadow and then into light, and it's flying around and we're moving. Now this whole thing is going very quickly. You see that this animation moves very fast. But we can get around that, or we can actually add more frames to it. And I should have done this to start out with because this is going to make things a little bit more complicated. But if 3 seconds is long enough for you, then go ahead and leave it just like it is. But I want it to be a little bit longer. So the way we do that is in this little bar here. Right now we have frames going from 0 to 90, but we can increase this amount now. So we could say, if we can even do math here, so I can say 90 times 3. And it's going to make it 270 frames, 3 times as long. So that should be 9 seconds. So now that this is longer, that means we have to move our keyframe. Remember, we recorded those keyframes. So I want to click on this tag on the spaceship. And now you see how we have that little dot right there and this little blue one right here. It might be a little tough to do, but very carefully click right on that dot and drag it all the way to the end of the animation. And that all we've done is retimed it. We've said that you don't stop at 90, you stop at 270. But now when I hit rewind and hit play, actually I'm going to go to object mode just because I can. Deselect everything by clicking in the blank spot here. Now I can hit play and I should have a little bit more of a steady ride. So that's kind of fun. Another thing we can do, oh, and another hint is if you want to go back and edit some things, you can click on this little button on the camera again and go back to your edited view, and now you see where your camera is. So we can edit some other things. Now, right now, my spline's a little choppy. I don't like it. And like I said, that's why I don't like drawing the freehand ones. But we can change if I click on my path, we can change this to different types of splines. And I'm actually going to change it to Akima. I was going to change it to Akima because that will make it a smoother type of spline. We can also try B-spline. B-splines are super smooth, but we're going to have to I'm going to have to fix my path a little bit. You see how my lines are passing through the mountain? So I actually have to go and grab my points and pull them around. So that I'm not actually crashing into the mountain because that's no good. So you see I can drag my path around. I even pull it up a little bit to anything I like. And I mean, every step of the way in this process, you can go and make it more elaborate and manipulate things and make things fancier than they were, than what I did in the tutorial. And by all means, I would love for you guys to do that. But I think this is pretty much going to wrap up this tutorial. I can click back on my camera, and don't forget you can have all these tools. So I can actually move further back from the spaceship. I can right click on the zoom one here and pull out so I can actually see more of the scene. Get a little bit of a fisheye going, hit rewind, hit play, and so that's kind of cool. But I'm probably going to be passing through the mountain like that because I'm so far from the spaceship, so I can actually pull away, maybe go a little bit more directly behind it. I'm still crashing through the mountain a little bit, but you see it's flying pretty cool. Oh, maybe go straight behind it. If you made your canyon wider, or you can even shrink your spaceship, but that's working. That's all right. So that's kind of fun. It's a little lumpy, but these are the basics. Creating an entire animation from scratch in Cinema 4D. So the last thing we should do is I'll show you the render settings. We do that by going to Render and go to Edit My Render Settings. And okay, there's a whole bunch of different settings here. And the most basic well, we want this to be an animation. Default, yours probably says 800 by 600. That's all right resolution. One of the most important things is your frame range. Right now it says current frame. That's only just one picture. We want all the frames. So you go to all frames. And then once you've gone to all frames, then we tell it to save. And we do that by clicking on our output or save right here. And where are we going to save? We're going to save to, actually, let's save that for a second. Hang on, my hard drive's got to spin up now. Doing, 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 doing. Cancel. First thing we're going to do is what format is it? So I'm going to click on TIFF. We don't want it to be a TIFF. You could render as a TIFF sequence, but I'm going to go to QuickTime Movie. Now, it is in general a good idea to render out to a series of stills and then compile them in some other program, but let's just do this quick and say QuickTime Movie. And I can click on options, and from options you can do things like set it to your compression and how many frames a second it saves as and the quality. But after I've done that, I can just click on this dot 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 and then tell it where it's going to save. And I'm actually going to save into not the Clover folder, but the tutorials, and I can make a new folder. This is my 25th Grayscale Gorilla tutorial. Spaceship, even though we're on the land. And I'm actually going to make another folder called MOV, or maybe even renders is why I always call it. Renders, and then we can just call this test 1. So that's the name of it in my folder. Hit save. Okay, now we've told it where it's saving, and we've told it what type of file it is. There's a whole bunch of other settings, but we don't have to worry about those for right now. We'll just keep it basic. Now that we've got our render settings, I can actually close them. And now we say render to picture viewer. When you render to the picture viewer, it's actually going to begin the process of rendering out every single frame of your animation. So it's going to have to render out, for what I set up, 270 pictures in a row. And that will take a little bit of time to render. And that is the cue for a little segue. What was mere seconds for you was 6 minutes for me. Ha! So let's see what the final is. I haven't even looked at it yet. Me. Da, 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 da. Okay, definitely not going to win any awards, but hopefully this gave you guys a little test of a whole bunch of different aspects of Cinema 4D. And I have no idea how long this tutorial is, but maybe a whole bunch of aspects of Cinema 4D within about an hour. So yeah, maybe I'll follow this up with some more basics, but I always do tutorials on kind of more complicated techniques. I am not the best lighter or renderer or modeler, but I like to do the technical things. So doing this basic one was kind of fun. Yeah, that should pretty much do it. I will see you guys next week. Toodles.